Continue to look back and reflect on the life of the late statesman, former president of Zimbabwe, Robert Gabriel Mugabe.
Yeah, no doubt today the news will be dominated by a lot of people sending through condolences to the former president, and I can already see one coming through here, as one would imagine, the ANC. Just to read it to you, they've expressed condolences over the passing of former President Robert Mugabe. In a statement, the governing party says Mugabe was a leader and revolutionary dedicated to serving his people. Mugabe passed away in the early hours of this morning in a hospital in Singapore, aged 95. We're waiting for the current president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, to address the world regarding the passing of the former president. And of course, the ANC talking very highly and speaking very highly of Mugabe, saying that his contribution to the history of Zimbabwe and the African continent as a whole will never be forgotten.
And this is what we're talking about, just getting a more holistic view of the man, his life, the firebrand as a young man, just looking at that transition that Zimbabwe went through. And yeah, it makes me a bit nostalgic about history and telling the stories, in their entirety.
Indeed. I mean, if I can read another condolence message that has come through, and this one's quite an interesting one, because this one actually comes from the opposition leader, Tendai Biti. And we know the tumultuous relationship there. So Tendai Biti saying that although he was imprisoned and tortured by the late Robert Mugabe, he still feels saddened by his death. He was basically saying that for all our fights with him as opposition, the fact of the matter is that he was the founding father of our struggle. He shepherded Zimbabwe for all these years. Now that we've got this new Emmerson Mnangagwa, we really appreciate how he actually protected Zimbabwe. He's talking about Mugabe. We express our deep loss to the people of Zimbabwe. So that word coming in from opposition leader Tendai Biti in Zimbabwe.
And of course, throughout the day, throughout the morning, we will be bringing you more on this as the story develops. We are waiting out in Cape Town. Our colleagues are out waiting to hear from the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa, and we'll take you there as soon as that becomes available.
All right. So let's also just tell you something that also has come out now. I'm just reading coming through from our SABC team saying that there's news coming through. We're going to update this as well, that former President Jacob Zuma has been ordered to apologize to Derek Honeycomb. We don't have too many more details about this story. I've just seen it come through on our SABC news group. So that's something that we'll get more details on and find out what's going on. But right now, I can actually see we trying to set up at the World Economic Forum as well. I can see that's also going to be, I imagine, a bit of a changed agenda, seeing the passing of President Robert Mugabe. I'm sure a lot of condolences will be sent there, moments of silence spoken to as well, and a lot of people wanting to present their feelings onto, the world about how they saw the former president. So it'll be interesting to see what happens at the World Economic Forum.
It certainly will be, and no doubt the founding father of the Zimbabwe that we know today. So, as promised, we are taking a look at the life of the former Zimbabwean president. And this one here, we were looking at his life as a Pan-Africanist. And unfortunately, the sound had cut out at some point. That package put together by our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena.
From north to south, respected by some, while others are highly critical of Robert Gabriel Mugabe, the freedom fighter. But for the parties which believe in Pan-Africanism, Mugabe is an outstanding leader who made mistakes like any other leader, although some were very costly.
One thing that you cannot take away from President Robert Mugabe is the fact that he's played a monumental role not only in the liberation of Zimbabwe, but in the liberation struggle of many countries around the continent and in the SADC region in particular. I know of leaders that he has supported during the time when his government was still doing the right thing, for example, in Zimbabwe. But the fact of the matter is now he's become one of those leaders who want to die in office, which is very unfortunate. He's turned himself into one of those big men of Africa who think that they are more important than their countries and more important than their continents. I think as he gets ready to celebrate another milestone in his personal life, the message from us young people should be clear. It's time for him to go and retire. so that young people in Zimbabwe can then begin the process of rebuilding that country, so that we as young people who are next in line as leaders can also begin to build networks between these countries in the SADC region and take the development of the SADC region forward.
ZANU-PF had a strong bond with the PAC during the struggle, and the two parties still share the same views on the land question. The same with APC and AZAPO. But it's the EFF leader's relationship with President Robert Mugabe which raised eyebrows. Julius Malema, as the youth league leader of the ANC, revered the veteran leader. He even paid a visit to Zimbabwe to meet him. And it is this visit that contributed to his radical statements which led to his expulsion from the ANC. The SABC has since reliably learned that when Malema was expelled from the ANC, Mugabe commented that, to quote, "You don't do that to the young energetic leader. You rather channel his energy in the right direction." And this is what Malema had to say about President Robert Mugabe during his twilight years.
Never pretend. Always, when you see a white tendency, you must deal with it decisively. And that's what President Mugabe is doing. That's what President Mugabe did when he took the land and said this land must be returned into the hands of our people. We salute him for that. We worship him for that. But we have a problem with him wanting to stay until death. We believe there are so many young people who are inspired by him in his own country. If he can inspire us here in South Africa, there must be surely a lot of them who are inspired in Zimbabwe who can take over from him and continue the legacy. And it is only those who suffer from a mind of a rat who will see a criticism of your heroes as hatred. No, we don't subscribe to politics of personality cult, even if we love you so much. But today, you're not dressed properly. We think you could have put in a red color. You're going to look much better. But it doesn't mean that we don't admire your thinking. It doesn't mean that we don't admire your bravery. We don't admire commitment to the revolution. So it is those who subscribe to politics of personality cult who say you cannot criticize those that you worship and
So then when you speak about Robert Mugabe and you say that this is his time to go, obviously he's been in power since 1980 if I'm not mistaken, what role do you think then African leaders should be playing in steering what they call presidents for life, steering them in the right direction, that this is not the route to go? What role should the AU be playing as well?
They must tell the President Mbeki made a very persuasive argument in the last AU summit that we as peers must have the ability to tell one another that what you are doing is unacceptable. We knew that when we say President Mugabe should accept that it's time to go, we'll receive a lot of criticism from our own, from ZANU-PF chaps, but it's the right thing to do. There is no any other way of telling the truth. So the AU need courageous leadership, which will tell their own peers that this is not right, like they did, like ECOWAS did. So we need more ECOWAS. We need SADC to say to President Mugabe, don't you think it's time to say goodbye? And he must not, after leaving the position, die. No, he must live long to see his legacy continuing and going beyond Zimbabwe into South Africa, into the entire SADC region and the entire continent.
Sophie Mokoena, SABC News, Johannesburg.